My name is Justine Prue, and I'm a tattoo artist and a mural artist, and I do all sorts of different artistic mediums, paintings and canvases, wall murals, and yeah, all sorts of art installations. I feel like since I was very young, I've always felt really inclined to draw. I've been drawing since I could remember, and when I was very young, when I was about 8 or 9, that's when I decided I really wanted to be a tattoo artist. And I think it just came very naturally to me, and it was something that I always just really loved to do. And then as I got older, it always seemed like no matter where I went in life, I always came back to art when I was younger and a teenager, and I love doing it. Nature, I always say is my first and foremost, maybe even my only inspiration. I feel sometimes I love doing animals and plants. So anything in the natural world really inspires me. It depends whether I'm doing a mural or a tattoo, because sometimes I do very large pieces of work and sometimes they're very small. But I find in general, I do a lot of nature and connections and relationships. So especially with the mural work, how animals and people and the land and spirituality all work together. And then with tattoos, it's a lot more personal because the tattoo is for one singular person. But again, it's all usually about life experiences, honoring other people, memorial tattoos. But sometimes people just get artwork that they really find is pretty and nice.
Yeah.
So I tattoo all sorts of different things. But I'd say, yeah, in general, relationships and connections and nature. Yeah, so this painting is a smaller piece of my Returning to Our Roots art installation on the RBC Convention Center. So this was used for a live painting event when we were showcasing the RBC installation. And it's from the summer panel. In that installation, there's 4 for every season. So this is for summer. And it's centered around the creation story. So the beginnings of North America or Turtle Island. So I love including the muskrat in he's the star of the creation story. So he's usually in a lot of my pieces if I'm doing something with the creation story. And then I have some people. I don't paint a lot of people, I find, in my pieces. It's mostly animals, but there's a lot of roots coming down from the trees and the people. And you can see this, there's a lot more on the turtle shell in the bigger piece of artwork. Yeah, so I always like to mention that there's lots of different groups that have different variations of the story. So I'll kind of give a general story, but there's a flood on Earth, and the creatures that survive are creatures that can swim and fly. So the turtle is the main one, but we have the muskrat, we have lots of birds, lots of fish. And the creatures are all together. And in a lot of the variations of the story, there's a spiritual being called Nanabush or Nanabozo. And he is kind of a helper that helps the animals create Turtle Island. So he says to the animals that we need to get some dirt from the bottom of the water. So the loon tries, different fish try, different birds try, all sorts of different animals try, and they can't get down to the bottom. And the muskrat, who in the story kind of represents somebody who is smaller, he's underestimated. That's the whole kind of thing of the story. And he goes down to the bottom, or tells the animals he's going to go down to the bottom of the water and get the piece of dirt, and they mock him and they laugh at him and they tell him that he's too small and that he's not going to be able to do it. But he goes down to the bottom and he's gone a very long time. And the animals, they're waiting for him and they're starting to wonder about him. And a long time passes, and slowly he comes back up to the surface. And in his little paw, he has a teeny little piece of dirt. And in some stories, the muskrat's life is taken, but in some he survives. Most of the ones I've heard, he loses his life. So he comes up to the surface and he has a little piece of dirt in his paw, and the animals take that piece of dirt and put it on the turtle's back. And that's how North America or Turtle Island was created. And I do that story a lot in murals at schools. The kids, I find, really enjoy it, and a lot of them really relate to the muskrat, I think. Yeah, whether I'm making a smaller piece like a tattoo or a bigger piece like a mural, there's always the brainstorming process. So I find the first thing that I do, I find I work very technical, and I like to scale things out and know exactly what my canvas looks like before starting. So a lot of the time, you know, if it's on somebody's body, I'm looking at the body part and figuring out how big we want to go. And same with the wall, I'll take measurements and usually talk with the school or business about, you know, what we're doing. So that's the first part of it. And then once I know what kind of area I'm working with, then I know how much detail I can put into it, how much can fit into it. And then sometimes with the murals, I'm working with students. So that kind of is a little bit different depending on how I'm doing the creative process. But with the students and you know, input from staff when I do a mural, I usually collect all of their ideas and we do a little bit of a brainstorming session together. I think that in general, I like to really reflect the natural beauty of the world in my pieces, and I really think that right now, in general, I feel like as people, we are a little bit separated from the earth and separated from nature. I feel like there's so much technology and there's such a boom in what technology is doing right now that that I think that one thing we should really be reminded of is to spend time in nature, and especially spend time with those connections and with human connection as well, and with connections in our community. So if there's one thing I hope that people take away from my work, it's to kind of remember what life is all about, what it should be all about, and to foster those connections in their own life. I I find that like in all Indigenous artwork, even in different areas of the world, I find that their artwork is so it's so thought provoking. And the way when I was very young, I was really drawn to looking at Indigenous artwork because I just loved how everything was depicted with connecting lines and the just the way everything kind of looked all together. Yeah, I don't know. That I was just so drawn to it when I was young and as I was growing older. And once I became more confident in my own Indigenous identity, because that itself was a whole journey. I found that it was just such a fun art style to work in, and it was so important. And um, yeah, I think that not all of my artwork is done in the woodland style, but a good chunk of it is. And I find that a lot of my clients, my tattoo clients specifically, are in general Indigenous people, are getting more and more Indigenous themed tattoos. I find when I started tattooing, that it wasn't as popular, I think. So I can see it through my decade of working in the tattoo industry that more and more Indigenous people are using artwork and tattoos to connect to their identity, and that's something that I really like. And I think that again, it all comes back to connections and relationships and that kind of thing. So I really, really like this building. It's probably my favorite building in Winnipeg or even in Manitoba. I'm very nerdy about how it was built and the Freemason associations. That's something I'm super interested in. And I'm not super skilled with math or geometry or that kind of thing, but I really appreciate how this building looks, and I love all the measurements and the numbers associated. And there's just so much thought put into it. Every little line and every little piece of and everything in the painting means something. It's not just there because it looks good, because it's pretty. And I find that when I teach the kids in my murals about woodland art, they start to see, okay, every single thing in this piece of artwork is very intentional. And that's how I feel about this building. I feel like it's very similar, that it wasn't just built to look nice. It took years and years and years of measuring and gathering materials, and just it's perfection.
My name is Jedrick Thrassi. I'm kind of new to the art world. I've had my first solo exhibition 2.5, maybe 3 years ago. I've been in Winnipeg ever since, living off my art. I was married before, like went through a divorce. There was a time when I had absolutely nothing, and art saved me. I've been doing it ever since. A lot of reading, videos, music, basically like the same thing as everybody else.
Classic.
A lot of content. I like history stuff. Yeah, mostly history. I have like tons of books. Really scatterbrains from like always all over the place, jumping from subject to subject, and yeah, I can't really say I'm interested in one subject. A lot of scenery up north, like the land up north. I like doing portraits, like pop art type of stuff, just like people that influence me, rappers, uh, like old chiefs, like Geronimo, Sitting Bull, like anyone. Yeah, I love doing those, and it doesn't matter who. It could be a rapper or chief. Well, I really didn't have an idea for this. Um, this painting actually happened by accident. I was painting a portrait and I put it up against the wall to dry. At the same time, I was painting a dream catcher and I put it up to dry. And by accident, it fell like this on each other. So I peeled it away, right? It had this image on there, like something like this. But that's where the idea came from. So I just used that and I made this. And yeah, just by lucky chance, I guess. Mother Earth sort of protecting the land, not just that, but sad over the land. Uh, yeah, I just try to capture emotion in there, and yeah, I can't really put it into words. Sometimes I could capture something and I can't explain it.
Right.
It happens often. Like I paint all day. My whole life is just art. It's like I wake up and I paint and I draw, sketchbook, whatever it is. I'm always doing multiple things at once. Uh, Sort of chaotic. Got music going. I'm reading. Chaos, and I just work and work. Piece here, piece there, and I just go all day, every day. My whole life is just art. I really can't say what I want people to take away. It's all perspective, right? It's like what people like. So I always keep that in mind, and I make sure I just try to share, like, put it out there, however they see it and however they feel about it. I just leave that up to them. I grew up in foster care, uh, sort of back and forth. I was on the reserve for a while with my family. And then I went to reserve. I mean, foster care. Then I went back and forth. It's sort of really chaotic. So I don't have a spirit name. I've never been to a sweat or a ceremony. Like I grew up in foster care. Uh, I can't speak my language, but I can understand when people speak it. So I'm kind of like, I don't know how you say it. I'm a foster kid. I'm like sort of lost in that. I'm really proud to be Indigenous, but no one's taught me, no one's held my hand. So sort of like lost in the air about all that. I had my first art show about 3 years ago, maybe two, can't really remember, but I heard there some of my pieces, maybe one, I heard some from my first art show are actually hanging up here. I don't know if that's true or not. I heard it through the word, right? I used to be a counselor in Tiduli, so I used to come here and have meetings and stuff with people. I think it fits in here. It fits with the whole theme, right? And for the legislative to have Indigenous art. I think that's important, and I really like that. I'm glad to be involved in that.
I'm Felix Noel. I was born in Winnipeg back in '71, and grew up mostly in Winnipeg, but I also spent some time in my youth up north. My home reserve of my mother, Opipinapoin. It's pretty far north, north of Thompson, Leaf Rapids, up in there. Back in the teens, and I moved back to the city, and that's when I got into carving. You know, back then I was in high school, so I was, how could you say, disillusioned, kind of angry young man, you know, and wasn't sure what to do myself, getting close to graduation and whatnot. And yeah, carving was starting to grow in my family with my cousins, and from close connections to Dene tribe, Duduli Lake. And yeah, so I just discovered that sort of happened chance, and I thought it was pretty interesting, right? And fell in love with it pretty much right away. The art part of it, of course, and just the freedom of it as well. You know, to get out there and create and sell them and show them off to people and stuff like that, give you a certain level of purpose, you know, and helped me a lot as a young man, for sure. Stay out of trouble. You know, just the life and the struggles and observation of the world, right? Like I said, back in the day, I was, you know, upset young man sort of thing, and a lot of it had to do with just the society and the world. And you know, when your eyes open at that age, you realize the complexity and all that of things happening in the world, and I didn't understand it very well. So that's why I got into carving, and then that continued, you know, to inspire me as I went along through my career. I kept it very independent in that sense that I didn't get an agent or any of that sort of thing, right? I just would go out and look for people who I thought might be interested, you know, that sort of thing. Back then too, you know, to get the stone to work on it, it can be very difficult. Typically, a lot of the artists buy it, you know, in the modern world. I mean, obviously, further back you go, the more you have to go find it yourself. And as a poor teenager, I couldn't afford it. So a big part of the inspiration too was to go out and find our soapstone, find our alabaster, find the stone in the natural world, right? And there's all over Canada. It's beautiful stone everywhere, but nobody minds it because it's already quite exploited from places like Brazil, Africa, different parts of the world. They have huge operations, right? So they can sell it very cheap. So for somebody to start that in Canada, you know, it's not silver or nickel, or, you know, they don't really want to bother with it. So I couldn't afford the stone. So off we went looking for it, and, you know, that ignited the adventures, as you could say, because now I have to travel across Canada and look for my stone. A lot of it is, you know, family, you know, traditional teaching, stuff like this, natural, wildlife, you could say, I guess, of Canada, you know, and there's always part of it is demand. Bears are the most popular. Everybody wants bears, right? So, and eagles, I guess, would be the next. And, you know, you can sort of work your way down all the different popular animals in Canada. So there's a bit of that for sure. And obviously, I love bears and all the nature we see around us. And yeah, but also I love to do pieces like this that have teachings, abstract combinations of different images, you know, brought together. This piece is made out of Winnipeg stone, actually, that I acquired through a second source. They were kind of accidentally found it while they were doing some construction, which was nice. But it's also a stone that I go up to on near Lake Manitoba. I would get a lot of stone from it. It's a similar stone that, you know, it veins through the province, right? You can find it in different spots as it pops up in nature. The black part is a pipestone from Eagle Lake, Ontario. And just inlay them, carve them separate and inlay them into the other stone. The chief and the bison. Now, this is a story obviously we know. A long time ago there was millions of bison who roamed these territories, and you know, they shook the ground. You could hear it for miles. You could feel it right through your bones. It was very powerful. And everybody always speaks of how, you know, obviously it took care of our ancestors. They used all part of the bison when they hunted, right? The meat and the fur and the bones and all that. And it's a good teaching and resourcefulness and honoring, you know, that sacrifice they made for us. And the other teaching also is the amazement of it, to see all those bison, you know, like a sea, like a river of animals through the prairie, miles long, you know, and they're talking millions back then. And the unity of it, you know, the power behind all that flow, I guess you could say, they're all coming together, those bison, right? They look after each other, and it was unstoppable, really, you know. And that was good teaching for us as family and society to come together, right? And that's the real strength in our society, is this unity. You know, it starts with our families, obviously, and then it goes out to our communities and broader. And, you know, in today's world with instant global communication and all the distractions we have coming at us, you know, it's like an onslaught. And so, you know, we need to remind each other that we need to come together. And there's more strength in that, in division, you know, and the differences that we have. And sadly that, you know, that thunder is gone. The bison are no longer around, and it's not a daily reminder, you know. And that's where the chiefs and our leaders come in. They have to hold up that truth and those teachings and remind us as people, you know, and make it strong in our community so we don't forget. And that's what this piece is about. The process, well, it's, you know, varied. Obviously, sometimes, like I say, bears are most popular, and if somebody wants a bear, I always have a few bears on the go, sort of thing, right? So then you go to your stone and you look for a bear in the stone. If you want to carve a bear, you look for something that's shaped relative like a bear. Maybe you can cut it in half and get it that way, you know, this sort of thing. Or if you're looking for an eagle, or if there's a particular thing you're looking for, right? Then the more fun process is when you're just looking at the stone itself and you have no objective and you're just trying to see the angles and the images and what can come out of it, you know. Often the stones, well, majority, like 90% more percent of the time, they're not cubic or anything like that. They have all random shapes and whatnot, right? So it really inspires you, you know, to wings or just different faces and things like this that come out in it. And of course, there's the, as you're going through the piece, often it changes as well. You know, you have an idea at the beginning, and you might not even see it clearly, but as you get further in, you start to see it.
Totally.
So the making of it, the physical part of it, you know, you start with the larger pieces and you cut off the bigger chunks, and you just move on to the smaller and smaller files as you get closer, and then the chisels and all that small needle stuff when you get into the details, right? There's always, you know, that trick of knowing when you haven't gone far enough or when you've gone too far. You know, you got to figure that out because you can do both.
Yeah, totally.
And at the end, and sometimes, often too, you'll sit down and you think, "Oh, it's great," but then you come back at a different time, maybe a few days later, or even hours sometimes, and you look at it again, and you're like, "No, I missed this." You know, there's that, and sort of that refining process of it too. in that sense, I like to keep multiple pieces going at once at different stages. Like some will be almost done, some will be just at the beginning, and then in the middle. This way you can get more step back perspective of it as you go through. I just hope it brings them to some kind of connection to the real world. Often people will be inspired totally different ways from the same piece. The eye of the beauty is the eye of the beholder, and that beauty touches some people. They'll gravitate, say, towards the bias, and another will be the chief. Some people will see patterns in the stone, and all sorts of shadows, the way it casts, and things that make you like this particular piece. If you notice, there's not a lot of fine detail in the feathers, in the headdress. It's all very flowy, very subtle, right? And just enough there to sort of stimulate your imagination. And then you kind of fill in, people will fill in the rest as they look at it. It's interesting balance sometimes. You want a lot of detail, but I've never really been in like a realism carving. Like you see people, they want it to look exactly like the animal, exactly like whatever it is their subject matter is. And I've always been more of the open flow. Like I like to do that as well, just to test myself, but I found that it generally, if you keep it more flow and open, people like it better. Actually, I learned that in Whistler. I was selling these dancing bears, and when I first started making them, I put all the claws, the eyes, and the ear details, and the mouth, and all, a lot of detail in the bears dancing. And I sold this gallery a batch, and they sold a bunch. So I sold them another batch. And by the time I got to the third batch, this was many years ago, and I guess I was in a rush. No detail on these ones. I just left them real simple. Just, almost like teddy bears, Turned out the lady said those sold way faster, way better. People loved them more than the detailed ones, right? And I was like, okay. That goes back to my the imagination. You lead them in, and then they fill in the blank, sort of thing, right? If you put too much detail, then that sort of limits your creative eye, I guess, or whatever, however you put it. Well, it's my whole inspiration, really. I mean, everything, like I said, is about stories I've heard, teachings. There's a lot of common, obviously, ones that everybody recognizes and can relate to, and then there's more obscure stories and ideas. I try to always look at that perspective as I go into a piece, for sure. Oh, well, I love the carvings on it. Definitely as a young man, I was always inspired to see these great buildings and all the sculpting on the outside of them, right? And how old they are. And I often wondered, why don't other buildings have these things? And why did we give up that? If you notice, all the modern buildings are very kind of boring. There's not really art on the outside like these guys. We're topped with the golden boy. So, it's definitely inspiring. And even walking through it today and all the old architecture and the big stonework, it's very nice. I wish to see more of it around Winnipeg. Put me to work. This is a really call out to not only to, everybody, but to our leaders, and our chiefs. And obviously, this being the legislative of Manitoba, buck stops here, right? And I think a lot of people are looking for more leadership, more determination, more for the people, just like the bison had for us. And it's easy to forget, politics, right? And so to me, I hope as these leaders walk through these halls and they see this piece, they'll think about it, maybe read the story, you know, and when they have to make those tough choices, they'll put people first rather than rich corporations or, you know, personal interests, things like this. You know.
Yeah, incredible.
Just I really appreciate the time you guys taking for all those artists that you're hosting for it. You know, it's really nice. Thank you for choosing me, you know, and be amongst the group. It's pretty awesome.
My name is Lily Gautron. I am Red River Métis. I live in St. Boniface. I work in Winnipeg. I'm a Two-Spirit and disabled artist. I mostly work with beadwork and illustration. And I'm also a student at the University of Winnipeg, and I'm studying women and gender studies. I've always been very creative. I've always been making stuff as a kid. I used to draw a lot and make like cardboard sculptures all the time. And then kind of as a teenager, I was experienced like mental health issues, and I learned to bead my first year of high school. And it really just like carried me through a lot of hard times. It's a very supportive and like life affirming practice in my life. So I really love doing it, and it really helps me. And, yeah. I'd say my biggest one is kind of grandmother pieces or ancestor pieces. A lot of the older beadwork from past generations that are in museums or archives. I visit the Manitoba Museum a lot. And yeah, I try to study those pieces and build relationships with them. And then secondarily is like a lot of my beadwork peers. I have a mentorship with Claire Johnston, and so I get a lot of inspiration and a lot of like technique tips from her. And yeah, a lot of like queer artists that kind of inform the themes of my work. I'd say pretty central theme across a lot of my work is just like my queerness and my experience being autistic, both in queer spaces and not in queer spaces. And right now, it's mostly focused on like the nicer feelings of being in community in that way. Yeah, like belonging and love that I've kind of found. I wanted it to look a bit like a fire bag. So it kind of looks like the top panel of a fire bag, and the heart at the center of the floral is a motif that is in a lot of grandmother pieces. It's also a motif I use a lot in other beadwork. I really love having a heart hidden in the floral or just all over the piece. And then kind of the petals that are blooming outward from the heart, kind of unstructured, very flowy, like a little chaotic and messy, not really like as symmetrical as you see a lot of times. And yeah, I wanted it kind of connected to, there's this love kind of in the middle of community that you feel. There's this big, like, big love. And then there's also like messy, complicated, kind of like overwhelming and sometimes scary, like emotions and relationships and things going on, and they coexist. And it's like necessary that they coexist. Yeah. I tend to be walking a lot. I don't drive, so I'm like bussing around the city and walking a lot. And a lot of my like thinking through a piece is done when I'm walking around. I live right on the Seine, so I walk down that river a lot, and I'm like talking to myself and trying to figure stuff out, just about my art and in general. And then, yeah, I'll go down and sketch stuff. And usually when I'm beading, the actual like making the piece, I'm with my mom watching a TV show, or I'm with my friends doing a beading circle. So just that these like kind of complicated emotions can coexist. There can be this huge love for community, and also the kind of awkwardness and like friction that occurs, and they don't subtract from one another. It's like they need to coexist for a community to be cohesive. And then those kind of emotions also connect to the land, and like connecting with the land as well. There's so much love that happens, and like love for the land and love from the land. And then this like overwhelming grief also for like climate change and resource extraction and all of these things that are hurting us and the land. The love can't exist without also that grief. Like there has to be both. It's like the work wouldn't exist without it. All the beadwork I do is very, very tied to grandmother pieces, ancestor pieces, like all of the beadwork and bead workers that came before me, and the ones that I'm in relationship with now. And my work's tied to the land. Like I'm always kind of thinking through stuff on the land. A lot of my illustration work is really tied to the plants that are around me, like in the Seine. I think a lot of like very affecting decisions are made in this building for Indigenous Manitobans, and some of them are very positive and some of them are very negative. And I think bringing Indigenous artists and art into the space is a really important step towards reconciliation. And like, just bringing more perspectives in outside of like purely the political, kind of in a very structured sense. I'm excited to see what happens after this.
Dante, C.A. Matthew Buxton. So it said in Cleantro Denny, hello, how are you? My name is Matthew Buxton. It's, for language, for me, it's kind of something I've been working on. That's what, for me, is one of the last missing pieces of my life, to speak my language fluently. I'm originally from Brantford, Ontario. I grew up there, and I have lineage to Cleantro Nation, Northwest Territories. That's from my mother's side, my maternal side. My father's from Ontario. The practice of making the art is, it's different for everybody. You know, I always loved art. I've traveled around the world, lived abroad quite extensively. When I was younger, I lived in Thailand for a year when I went to school there. So I've always enjoyed visual arts, and I never took art in class. And when I was younger, I found it hard to do, but I've always been a creative person. And I've also always been around it in my family. My mother, right? My mother's an artist, and it was passed down to her from her grandmother, or her mother, I mean. And so it's a long line of people that practice certain things in the culture. So, and it all started in 2016 when I did a healing workshop with my mother, opening doors for dialogue with the late Samuel Thomas at the Woodland Cultural Center in Brantford. And I did that to support my mother, Celine, who was a residential school survivor. So they had representatives from the church, survivors from the Mushel Mohawk Institute, and there's a lot of history, right? So I did that. And before that, I saw her making moccasins for me in 2016. And then I've told this story before, but she said to me, "Oh, why don't you sit down? I'll teach you some of this." And this is before I started to do beadwork. I said, "Oh, I'll never do that. That's not something a man would do, right?" And then after the workshop, I picked up the style of two needle. That's what she taught us. And I learned from Samuel Thomas, who's a world-renowned artist who's passed away sadly, and he's done a lot of good work, right, with Indigenous people in Africa, and helped them revitalize their culture and the beadwork. So that was moving, and then it really hit me to, when they were sharing their stories of being survivors, that really hit me again, and it's just the reality, right? So what they went through, and where we're moving forward in reconciliation, and how we're all trying to get along. And so it all kind of started there. And that's kind of the basis, like how I picked it up, the beadwork. And yeah, I've just been going with it ever since. I would say how I feel about now, I just probably just the love of creating as an artist, like just being a true artist, just being in the zone and making something that I find enjoyable. So, but also like I'm inspired by, you know, the land, right? Like my culture, my family, my life story, right? And also what I see in the world and the colors. The colors are another big part of the inspiration for me. That's what I love to mix with and play with is the colors. And just the craft itself, right? The actual method of beading is very ancient form, right? It's they would have been using bone needles and everything before the fur trade. If you think about it that way, it would have been a lot harder to do. So we have it easy now, right? And yeah, I think what else? A lot. There's a lot inspires me. But I think, and also like I'm a teacher, right? So I teach in that, like I want to be in the classroom with my students, and then that inspires me too, right? Like showing them basics of art, starts kind of setting them up a little bit for that.
Yeah.
Themes would be definitely, themes would be justice, politics, history, land, identity, colonialism, imperialism, right? Empires, civilizations, and then past, present, future ideas, right? Ways of being. So there's a lot. But also like there's fun stuff too, like florals, right? Designs of like the florals, right? That you would see before contact period and things that they would use that they would have used, right? The native people. So there's a lot, but I think, for example, like one thing that came to me was when I'm doing beadwork, I had this idea of how I wanted to make my stuff, but I wanted to frame it. And that, so I have a lot of pieces that are framed. So that was a thing that I had an idea of in the beginning, was to make pieces that could travel and be on the wall in a gallery and shows, exhibitions, make it easy. That was one idea, and it worked out really well. This is one example. And the other idea I had when I started was when I was taught beadwork, and I picked it up and I really started to enjoy it. The first thing that I made for myself was a card holder that you'll see, you can buy anywhere, right, from certain places. Made that out of caribou hide, and I thought that it's just what I wanted when I was learning how to do beadwork. This is what I want to make, and I did. I still have it. I have it all, right? So that was the thing, was I wanted to make things for myself at first, and then when I got good at it, I decided, well, I thought right away, it's like, okay, well, now that I can make things for myself, I don't have to buy them from other people. I can make whatever I want. And that was the whole premise of how I got started as well. And like the vest, and I wanted a vest, and I made it, and it just morphed and went on to other things. So, and that's the power of art, right? The creativity is, if you can do it, it's the skill, the ability, and the patience, right? And also, like my inspiration is how it's taught, right? Traditional teachings like the seven grandfather teachings, belief in creator, belief in the Dene laws, which are ancient forms of governance for the indigenous peoples that they've had forever, right? And you can see the people that, you know, that live a good way, live a good life. They try really hard to make it, and it's not easy, some of these places. So, and also the connection to land, right? Spirit, excuse me, that being able to survive and hunt on the land, it's a big part of it, right? So that's something that I've done a little bit and I want to do more of. And that's where I find the most peace, because when you're in nature, you're on your own, right? If you don't with a hunting party, but then you're interacting with the animals, you're hunting animals, the sky, right? The seasons. So, and that's a part of the inspiration too. In some of my pieces is like connection to land, right? Being on the land. I think is something that's really important. And yeah, land's everything, right? People, it means a lot, and it has to stay that way. Yeah, so this piece is called Orbital Station Number 2, and it's basically came, I think it was in 2023 or 2021, maybe 2021. I think, I can't remember. Made so much art, right? Basically, I was trying new things. The black material, his wool, is the same as this one. And I was experimenting with bigger pieces. This is one of my larger pieces. And it took a lot of time. I'm probably saying around 80 hours because I was experimenting, trying new things. And I think it's the inside black. It's about maybe 12 by 12 inches, around there. The frame makes it bigger. The circle represents power and legacy and the universe a little bit. And these are some of my favorite colors, purple on the out. So this represents a thunderbird because of my love of some First Nations culture, right? The teachings. And this is just something in space. And this could be like a land map for hunting. And these are 3 people in a canoe traveling on water. And this is a representation of a water lynx. That's also part of First Nations and Ojibwe culture. And this is a sweat lodge because I love healing. Right? I need to heal as a person, as an artist. So yeah, and I was just trying new different things, designs, it's all handmade, obviously. And it's like the part is I use that is method is like I do my stencils with flour and water paste, so it's a really good fine line. I was taught by my mother, and that's also passed down as well. Yeah, it's one of my favorite pieces too. It's hard to when you make so much art, they become part of who you are as a being. So I love them all, but it's like I would probably say my favorite thing is the vest because that's me, right? But I've made so much art now that it's it's just a good feeling to do it, and it's like I can't stop making it, right? And that's how it is. I just want to make more and find the time. The piece and the time and the space is like paramount to being able to do good art, right? So that's a real big. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and that's kind of what this represents. It was like a lot of time it took, but also a lot of solitude. Beadwork's a very solitude form of craft, as you're on your own doing it a lot. And so I spent a lot of time alone doing that, and then I made it, and yeah, now we're here. It's basically like finding the piece, right? And then the time. Like I work full time, so I'm pretty busy. I did a lot. I have a lot of inventory now. I just had a big solo exhibition. So I've done some pieces I already want. So then they were pretty heavy, right? The tools of oppression, and then I think where I'm at now is I definitely want to make 2 more like this that are a bit bigger, and I want to commission those to the federal government. Maybe just the joy of color. I think it's brought me a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, making the art, traveling with the art. I travel around the world. I get to beadwork such a mobile form of craft. You can take it anywhere with you and do it. So maybe inspired by some of the messages behind it, right? Some of the stories, the storyline. Like you see, like some of the other pieces are kind of heavier. Like I call them tools of oppression. So like they have an idea of what justice is or injustice and who gets to control justice. So there's a lot of things to it, and that filter down from the themes. But yeah, I think definitely take away just the passion I have for it, right? And that it's not easy, but it's to be good at stuff in life, you have to do the work. And I think that's what shows through when artists are you know, when they're appreciated and they're honored, people can see that they did the work, and that's for me as part of it is like I was raised work really hard, right? I'm from the '90s generation, so we all had to work, and we didn't have a choice. You have to work, right? You have to be able to do it to provide for yourself and your family. So that's part of it, and yeah, maybe they can buy some digital prints. Yeah, just trying to take in the whole moment, right? It was a quick turnaround with the call, and then the being here, right? Making it all happen. So yeah, I think I just want to say that I appreciate all the support that I have from my family and friends, and that shout out to the Prince of Wales Heritage Museum. They did a phenomenal job my last solo exhibition at the museum. That was probably the biggest moments of my life was being there and with my family and being able to drum. Right, it was a long time coming, and I'm just so thankful, and I really appreciate that the people that enjoy my work. So must show.
Pinasewe, Makwa, Nishtakas, Pegos First Nation in Dunji. My spirit name is Thunder Bear, and my given name is Frederick Lyle Spence, and I'm from Pegos First Nation. I'm a recovering addict, and I used art as a form of therapy, not knowing that's what it was. And yeah, just the sense that it gave me. There was pride and love, and overall the feeling of joy. Yeah, so that's one of my themes in life is joy, is trying to hold on to the little bits of it every day or maybe every week. But so creating, I get that at the end usually. It's not something that's in the beginning, but yeah, creating and working with my hands, and yeah, that's why I do what I do. Yeah. Yeah, again, I don't shy away. I like to be called or be vulnerable. So in the beginning, my inspiration was spiritual healing. So I didn't grow up in the traditional ways, and I didn't start until I was about 26. So when I started carving, my main focus was the 7 teachings and the spirituality, those teachings. So smudging, dream catchers, ceremony, stuff like that. It inspired me in my early practice, and you could see the reflections of that now. And then currently I also have a contemporary side, so that like it's quite nice to see those blended. It really depends on how I'm feeling, right? So like with seasons, our emotions change, we change as people. And so when I first had the idea of this piece, it probably started almost 4 years ago. And that's kind of where it came from. Is I wanted to represent something that I went through in life, and I wouldn't be the person I am today without it. So this piece, it kind of dives into the hurt, but also the healing. And an example is that one of the things that inspires me the most is seeing people's reaction to things. So this particular piece when I look at it, I'm just kind of in awe. So I love it so much, and it really does carry a lot of my heart. Where something a little bit more recent and contemporary was I did a hot dog, and my son, when my son saw that, he just lit up, and to him, that's his favorite piece. And so something that is inspiring is seeing just childlike wonder and just kind of an awe feeling. I lost a close friend when I was younger. I was 17, and I didn't have the coping skills and therapeutic means to handle that in a good way. So that did lead me to substances, and so this represents that loss that I felt when I was younger. And it wasn't until I got older, I started processing my own, history and past in my way, through therapy, through ceremony. And one of the ceremonial practices is cutting your hair. Now, it wasn't until over a decade later that I started growing out my hair just for the purpose of cutting it, and that how symbolic it was. It really did make me feel like I had healed a bit of my heart. So the inspiration is through lived experience and through loss. And just the figure is holding their braid that is cut. It's presenting it, and even the heart, what I did was I took it and I took a hammer and I smashed it into about 11 or 12 different pieces, and then I put them back together, and there was some missing. And I kind of wanted that, because when you break your heart, when you lose someone, they're gone. We could say that we're 100% again, but really there's a piece of us that's gone, and that's okay. It's a memory. So the heart, it represents, it's broken, and it's not full, but it's healing, it's mended. And the copper wire is meant to be engulfed in the smudge, and through the copper wire we have words that represent what the figure is doing. And when you cut your hair, you're doing it out of loss, you're doing it out of pain, but the hope in doing it is that you heal and you find love, and you think about the people you might be cutting it for. And then the eagle, which represents love, it's hearing that prayer. And the figures, it's coming out of the figure's heart, and it's going into the eagle's heart. So I even had to Google where an eagle's heart was. And the eagle's going to take it and take those prayers and what you're asking to Creator, right? And that's why the eagle carries love. Yeah, it changes. Sometimes I could be inspired. I'm just trying to recall an inspiration lately, but it's a very, very funny. Even when I take off my elastic and I throw the elastic on a shelf or something, and the way that it's spiraling and stuff like that I could be inspired by that. With this one, it really depends on what I'm aiming to do. And there was a very specific reason and focus around it. And you could see how kind of there continues to be layers, right? And it's almost like I want to really make sure that what I'm doing is representing what I'm going through, or what my spirit. That it's a very spiritual thing. That's what it is. Another one of my most recent fun things that I made was a crock. So I made a soapstone crock, and I beaded the gibbets, if you know what gibbets are. But just making that, seeing people's reaction, that like it's fun. I'm silly. I'm a kid. I hope people take away what they need in the time that they spend with it. Like it depends on, maybe you've gone through loss recently, and it speaks volumes to you. So some people might feel sad. Some people might think of their loved ones and think of all the joy and the love that was there. So I want who's ever looking at the art to take away what they need. Yeah, it's less about what I want and more about what they need. Quite heavily. So I am from Peguis First Nation. I'm Ojibwe, and like I said, like my early practice was heavily around the 7 teachings. So my very first bison, or my very first carving, was a bison, and that the feeling of setting a goal, accomplishing the goal, giving myself pride, joy, love, all these things. When I showed my first carving and I finished it, I was like a kid. That's what I remembered. Look at what I made. And even now it gives me a little bit of emotional, but that's what sparked this. Look at what I made. I am so proud of myself. I love it. Oh wow, I spent however many hours, 8 hours, thinking about this, and I didn't think about, these other things. So it made me feel grounded and present and spiritually connected to myself. I didn't grow up in the traditional ways. It's something that in adulthood I had to seek out for myself. And that was the most healing thing, because as a young Indigenous person 36 years ago, our identities were taken from us. So that was a struggle at a young age. And so when I came of age to start, diving a little bit more into the teachings, you come to understand that it's spiritual. It's not a religious thing. It's smudging and ceremony and sweats and sundance and those things. Those are spiritual things. And so a way that I've attached it is when you're smudging, you're setting good intentions. You're spending your mental energy to set a good intention, that you want to see good in others, but you want to see good in yourself. You want to say nice things, and you want to love yourself. And that is meditation. Whether it's 5 seconds or 5 minutes, you're spending time setting an intention. That's a very spiritual thing. So when I started seeking the Indigenous teachings, it truly took me from a place of sorrow to a place of identity and pride. And I wouldn't be who I am today without those teachings. doesn't really impact me that much. I understand what the building represents. It's not something that, well, actually, so growing up on reserve, you almost feel separate from this place. Like, I didn't know that you could vote. Like, I didn't know I could vote for the prime minister, or I didn't know those things because it's something that doesn't really happen on reserves. They really feel separated, which was the purpose, right? But one thing that this building represents now, with Wab Canoe, is honor. I know some people might not agree with him at times, but that's what politics is about. But yeah, I seeing him dance at powwows and stuff like that. If I was at my age when I was younger, if I saw an Indigenous person in this building, then I might have opened more doors in that those barriers are now lower. So the building to me, and this is the first, last year, I brought my son to the open house and he loved it. There was kids singing in the choir and he said, I'm going to be up there one day singing. So I don't really have any like overwhelming feelings towards the building, but it's the systems, right? It's not, having this smudge in here will have, a certain impact for me, because it is, you want to take up space in a place that you weren't originally meant to be in or welcomed, legally being shut out from. Not that I could think of right now. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
If you think of something later, we can get that
It's
on
just
too.
interesting because like I'm sitting here and I'm having deja vu. It's a very interesting feeling. And
Wow.
one of the things that I love about that feeling is that you're exactly where you're meant to be. It's that your spirit has caught up with, or your body has caught up with your spirit. So, yeah.
My name is Sandra Cook. I'm born and raised in Churchill. I have a deep connection to the land that I was born into. But I've never felt completely connected to my community because my people didn't come from Churchill. My parents are from the Selkirk area. My dad is from Peguis First Nation. I'm status to Peguis. They moved to Churchill the year I was born. I'm the only person in my family. I'm the last of 7 kids. I'm the only one native to Churchill and the only one who still lives there. I can't imagine living anywhere else. I only recently started feeling part of the community as I started to understand my father and the complications, or the complicated relationship we had. He was a residential school survivor. And I grew up with an overwhelming feeling of being less than. What I've come to understand, and I didn't fully understand it or grieve my father until Kamloops happened in 21, and that was 12 years after my father's death. I started to understand him. And then I began to understand that my state of being is very common for children of residential schools. And that's where my own healing has begun. That's when I feel I started to mature as an artist and started to grow up. Because every person has to forgive their parents before you can grow up. I'm a late bloomer. That's when I started to fully understand the complicated aspect of my own indigeneity and be able to claim it. People, I've been told I walked in white privilege. Sometimes it's white curse, because I'm never brown enough, I'm never white enough. I have never felt like I fit in. I have grown up without my culture. So I feel sometimes that in calling myself an Indigenous artist, I'm being performative, that it shouldn't be allowed. I'm starting to understand that I actually own that. I am an Indigenous artist. I'm one who is learning and seeking out my culture and the spirituality that goes along with it. I might have inherited a lack of self-worth, but I also inherited the deep spirituality. And I'm just starting to understand that. And that's what drives my work. That's the thing that I can't say, but I can paint. And from what I understand from feedback, that I paint that well. And if every painting that I create touches just one person and helps one person to connect and to see that we're all related. The flyers, the swimmers, the ones who walk on 4 legs and 2, we're all related. If one person sees that from one of my paintings, I won. So that's me. That was always there. I'd like to say sometimes baseball. I had to play baseball when I was a kid. I hated it. My mom was a coach. I learned a lot about clouds, being stuck out in the field. I was always a dreamer, always an observer. And I started to create at an early age, but I kept it a secret, always. It wasn't until almost my 50s that I started to share my artwork and even contemplate calling myself an artist. It very quickly became my full-time job, just because I'm lucky to live in a tourist town, so a natural market. I wish I had started earlier, but I think I started at the right time. So I don't think something can get a person into art. I think you are. It's what you're supposed to do. It took me a long time to learn what my job is, and I'm very grateful to finally know. Long walks, sitting on rocks. I was told by an elder once when I couldn't understand something and I was told, go sit in the bush. And I said, there's no bush where I live. And there's rocks, and he said, go sit on a rock. I sit on rocks a lot and think and contemplate and give gratitude for what we have, this beautiful life that we have. And then the inspiration just comes, right? On top of that, I am a working artist. And sometimes finances dictate what a person creates as well.
Absolutely.
So there is that too. Yeah. I did mention the interconnectedness, but that alone can be the jumping off point for so much more. Because if you shift your thinking from humans as dangerous to the planet to humans as connected to the planet, things change. When a person understands the interconnectedness of all beings, then we start to understand our place here and the importance of humankind as stewards. We don't have to be the damaging force that we see ourselves, and we don't have to be the owner and the manager. We're the caregiver. So it starts with the interconnectedness, but if I can send that message, that's a good thing. I don't know if I can tell you. I know that when I set out to create a painting, of course, I start and fail 1,000 times and feel that anxiety. And then the painting takes on a life of its own and it becomes somebody that you develop that relationship with and you fall in love. I have created some paintings that I haven't fallen in love with or haven't had that little bit of heartbreak. But when you do, when you have that emotional feeling and you have that connectedness, again, I keep going back to that, you communicate with the painting. I have had quite a few people refer to this painting as he. I see her as she. I see the courage of bear as female courage. It's the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to be gentle, to be kind, and wise, and fierce. At the same time, there's a knowing. I grew up with a very strong mother who always knew the truth. And I hope that those eyes are in here as well. That knowing look. The mother, the strong mom. That's what I see. It's chaotic. I'm an untrained artist. I've had no formal training whatsoever. I would love to one day, but I think I'm faking okay for now. I don't have, I know people say, what's your process? I don't know. It's just chaos. If you saw my studio, you would want to clean it up. I have several works in process all the time. And I don't have a method. It's different every time. Sometimes I dive right into painting. Sometimes I plan things out. Sometimes it starts with a sketch or two, sometimes not. I don't know. I don't have a process. Chaos. Again, that connectedness. I want people to connect with a piece on an emotional level, on a visceral level, where they might not even be able to speak about it, if that makes sense. Where they're, for me, a good painting will break my heart a little bit, just like a good song will. And if that painting can break someone's heart, can hit that emotional thing, because we live in a world where there's not a lot of connection. Sometimes people are afraid of their real emotions. And if you can feel something from something I've created, that means we are connecting, if that makes sense. And then the next person, he's going to look at it. If you're going to buy that painting and put it on your wall, someone's going to come and visit you. And they might feel a connection. And that builds that threads of connectivity. I really would hate to tell somebody what to think of a piece. And you know what? Some people are going to look at it and just be ambivalent, and that's okay too. That's perfectly fine. That means it wasn't meant for you, if that makes sense. It's so highly wrapped up in it. How to explain this? The two aspects, those two aspects, art and indigeneity, started growing within me at the same time. I didn't realize it, like I told you, until 21 when Kamloops happened. And I still at times don't completely understand it. There are times I'm reluctant to call myself an Indigenous artist because I don't have, my artwork isn't typically Indigenous looking. But maybe it is, because what I have in my artwork is a deep reverence for my relations, for I do a lot of animal portraits. I don't like to call it just animal artwork, it's portraiture, if that makes sense. And the feedback I get is that, oh, I can connect, I see the soul of the animal in your work, I can see the spirit of the animal. I don't think I would be capable of doing that if I didn't reach into the spirituality that's at the core of my being, which is wrapped up in my indigeneity. Oh, at the beginning you mentioned if you speak any of your language. I'm learning some of Anishinaabe, but I don't have it. I don't have the language. I have some words and phrases that mean a lot to me, yet I'm still very shy to speak, so I won't. But the phrases, the concepts, don't translate into English well, if that makes sense. And that becomes part of my thought pattern when I'm creating. Zero, I'm intimidated. That's about it. I know that this is the seat of our provincial government. That's all I know. Oh no, wait, I did take a tour here in grade 6. For my grade 6 trip, we toured the ledge and we sat in on Parliament. That was exciting. That's about it. Wow, that's a good question. How do I see that? I almost see it as being out of place. Not quite fitting in. I don't know. I don't know. That remains to be seen. Okay, well there's no going back from colonialism. But there's a way to move forward respectfully. Okay, it started with the land acknowledgements. Then it's okay, so you're admitting you are on native land. Okay, now what are you doing? So moving forward from this, I'm hoping maybe this is the first step. Maybe there can be more Indigenous voices within our government. Well, it is starting, of course it's starting. But let's have more of that. And more voices from different places, like artistic voices. It's an important thing to also not see indigeneity as historical. It needs to be modern Indigenous art, modern voices, to speak about our lived experience now, what's happening now. And I was concerned about my artwork being one of those voices, because I had mentioned I am a child of a residential school survivor. I did not grow up within my culture. So I was worried about my artwork, myself speaking about it being performative rather than authentic. I was very concerned about that. But my voice is the voice of those who had their culture taken away and who are asking for it back. That's the people I'm representing. And we need to have all Indigenous voices represented. All modern Indigenous voices. Because we're not historical, we're right now. And we're moving forward. So let's